Hello and welcome. Good afternoon. You're with the Economic Times and my name is Ashutosh Sinha. Today we'll be talking about supply chain resilience through digital transformation, brought to you by IBM and the Economic Times. So let me first explain why this is so critical for tomorrow's businesses. And indeed, some would argue it's even important for today's businesses. Consumers and businesses as well want confidence in the provenance of their data and data as well as access to visibility, as some would say, from the paddock to the plate. Some others would call it the farm to the fork. Food chain traceability standards help map and document a product's history, creating trust and confidence towards consumers. Call it visibility through the system, in other words. The same principle works across different sectors. Pharmaceutical companies want to trace the products back to its original source. Food and beverage companies require everyone amongst its own network of the growers, the processors, wholesalers, distributors, and the entire chain to collaborate seamlessly. If we were to speak about the automobile companies, they need reliable systems that can ensure the business continuity if, God forbid, any product recalls were to happen. But the market's changing. And what's driving that change across industry? There are many reasons for that. So it could be consumer demand, it could be regulatory reasons, and we're talking various sectors across here. Sustainability issues, or just, enhanced level of competitiveness. As supply chains of tomorrow are getting designed for the digitally driven world, they perhaps need to be built with traceability of data in mind. M2M or machine-to-machine communication could add that extra dash of zing to the way the system could be working in the future. So it is a complex emerging world, and there are experts to join me and who are joining me right now to talk about the issues that are being thrown up as businesses are realigning in the emerging new world order. So let me introduce the experts today. Aashish Bhatia, Regional Vice President and General Manager, Visteon, India. Atanu Roy, Group CIO at Biocon. Krishnan Venkateswaran, Chief Digital and Information Officer, Titan Company. Vinod Khode, Group CIO at Varroc. And Levine Naidoo, Frictionless Business Executive, IBM Sterling, Cloud and Cognitive Solutions Sales at IBM. Thank you so much, gentlemen, for joining us and talking about this, something very critical, and everyone seems to be talking about the supply chain today. But first, let me request Levine Naidoo, who joins us all the way from Australia, for a welcome note. Levine, thanks so much for joining us. And it must be the end of your working day in the east coast of Australia.
Sure, yes, it is. But it's still very bright because we're in daylight savings. And thank you for welcoming me to today's session. Firstly, I trust everybody can see my screen. I've just got a single slide. I'd like to firstly extend a very warm welcome to my esteemed colleagues. Thank you for sharing your very valuable time and insight with us today. In fact, hats out to you, as your systems and technologies have become more critical now than ever, given the troubled times that the global economy is in, right? So just some stats very quickly. If we look at the stat on the left-hand side, the Economist Intelligence Unit surveyed about 400 senior supply chain and procurement executives in 5 sectors earlier this year, in agriculture and food, industrial, consumer goods and retail, healthcare and pharmaceuticals, and energy and utilities, in order to understand the issues around the business cost of supply chain disruption. Their research found that disruptions have incurred substantial financial costs, averaging around 6 to 10% of annual revenues. And that's the stat on the far left of the screen. as well as reputational costs, and some of them can be quantifiable and some of them can't. And so in terms of customer complaints and damage to brand reputation, if we then look at the next stat from that same survey on to the right of that, in fact, 60% of respondents agree that redundancy and resilience to their company's supply chain are more important than speed and efficiency. In fact, 32% strongly agree. Imagine that for the past few years, we've been focusing on supply chain optimization, and now that's kind of flipped, right? If we look slightly to the right of that at McKinsey's insight on buying into sustainable value chain, they suggest that 2/3 of the average company's environment, social, and governance footprint lies with suppliers. These ESG performers enjoy faster growth and higher valuations than other players in their sectors by a margin of 10 to 20% in each case. So strong ESG credentials also drive down costs by 5 to 10% as these companies focus on operational efficiency and waste reduction. Lastly, the research insights from the IBM Institute of Business Value indicate that 70% of consumers now look at very specific attributes and are willing to pay 37% premium for full transparency. In fact, 60% of consumers are now willing to change their shopping habits to reduce environmental impact. So what does this all mean? So C-suite are constantly under pressure now to deliver a better customer experience at the lowest cost to serve. But as of the last 2 years, they're also begun to grapple with resilience, transparency, and sustainability. These three top of mind issues appear to have both tactical and strategic dimensions. So again, extending a warm welcome to my colleagues to share insights and thoughts around these topics. Thank you, Ashutosh, back to you.
Okay, thanks so much, Levine, for just giving a big picture view on that. So let's start with the questions. And my first question, I'd like, maybe Atanu, if you can go. How do businesses see the value in verifying the product origins? And the regulatory part of it, and also the business part. If you can paint a big picture for that, please.
Yeah, thank you, Ashu. In the pharmaceutical industry, and we are all, at some point of time, consumers of various types of drugs, either for ourselves or for our near and dear ones, and sometimes at a very critical stage in life. And it is extremely important that we are assured of the authenticity of the supply which we are taking. And there are enough evidence, and it happens that many times we are not sure whether the injection we are taking is the real one, or it is something, it is a counterfeit product. And these would have disastrous consequences on the life of the patient. Even as in the recent thing of COVID, there has been enough instances where remdesivir was wrongly sold, or water was sold instead of the right injection. So these things have been happening. And so getting the authenticity of the product is extremely important for patient. The second part is that the efficacy of the product. And many times, while you might be having the right product, and the patient has all rights to know that, am I taking the right product? The ability to see, okay, if there is a problem in the product and one patient is impacted, we need to ensure that other patients which has using the same product shouldn't get impacted, so that we restrict the damage of it. Mm-hmm. And that is where product traceability is extremely important. And it is the same solution which can do it, whether it is through a QR code or through blockchain. There are various means to make it happen, but serialization of the product with whatever means to prevent counterfeit of the product, to make the patient safety a must, is an important part for the pharmaceutical industry and overall healthcare delivery itself. And this goes all the way from the last pill and the last vial and the injection which a patient takes, and to the whole supply chain of where it is getting distributed, at what conditions it was stored, because many of the more expensive or the critical products have to be stored in cold supply chain. It has to be stored within this. If you take even a country like India, which is highly dispersed, from the factory, it might have gone to the distributor at the right condition of temperature. But in a remote village in Rajasthan, has it gone at 8 degrees centigrade? Has it been stored in the last mile at that temperature? So how do you have the traceability, not only of the authenticity of the product, but that it has been transported and distributed in the right condition, so that when the patient takes it, a cancer patient takes it, the drug that the patient is taking is going to be effective. And many of these difficult drugs or complex formulations, if they are not kept in the right condition, they become toxic. And not only, it is better not to take the drug than taking a drug which is toxic and it creates further damage. So it is, one is the authenticity of it. And the second part is tracking the entire value chain to ensure that the drug has been kept in the right condition throughout. And having this visibility ensures patient safety, which is the prime concern. And the second part is, once we have all that information, it helps us as an industry to do our supply chain planning and execution more effectively, because we get all that data. And now we can sharply define where is the real demand signals coming and where we need to supply the product, because our resource capacity, our factory capacities are limited. So raw materials are limited. So are you making the right product which has the most demand, and then where do you distribute it? So these all things becomes extremely important, and that traceability of the product, that infrastructure and the ecosystem helps in delivering multiple benefits, which the pharmaceutical industry is currently trying to work on.
Okay. So Krishnan, then the question also is, how are you seeing organizations verify product origins, quality, if at all it's happening? Because as you know, we were just speaking a little while ago that the law is not in place in India. Is that beginning to happen, Krishnan?
It is. Now, I must say I'm thankful that I'm addressing a perhaps milder form of the problem than Atanu has just described, right? Having said that, now if you take jewelry, for example, the government has launched a hallmarking initiative, which perhaps many of us are aware of, right? And so there is a government mandated and managed process by which jewelry buyers today can be much more assured of the authenticity of what they are buying in our stores. But I will actually switch to one initiative which we have implemented in our Tanera sarees business, which probably addresses the point that Levine made about redundancy versus agility. And I think here we have managed to achieve both. Now we source handloom sarees from all over the country, right? You may be aware that sarees are created by expert weavers who are in very remote areas of India, right? Whether it's Banaras, whether it's Tamil Nadu for Kanjivaram, or the eastern part of Bengal, the communities are remote. And from there to come into the stores in the cities and into a warehouse for e-commerce, there's quite a distance to travel. And my colleagues who are sourcing the sarees actually travel to these communities and select. So the problem is a very simple one. How do I ensure that the saree that I have selected is exactly the one that is landing up at the warehouse, right? And what we have done is to implement an optical tag. And what this optical tag does is to create a composite image of itself and the fabric below. So if you have to peel off that tag and place it on another saree, the associated app itself would tell you that this tag has been transferred. And so therefore the authentication test fails. So this is working very well for us. And this has the added benefit that my expert colleagues who are at the viewer community know the attributes of what they're buying. So on the app on their phone, they can record the vital attributes of the product from their own knowledge much more quickly than the central warehouse team would be able to, right? So as it travels to the supply chain, attribution is done at source. So therefore, the 15, 20 properties of the sari that customers would look for, browse for, search for are recorded right at the time of buying. So then the supply chain movement right into the stores can happen much quicker. So this is one example of how we have managed to solve the authenticity as well as the agility question in what we are experiencing in a very pleasing fashion, right? Does this hold for all our products? No. Now, for example, if you take large diamonds, we laser cut those diamonds with an image that tells us that it's indeed the one that we have sourced, right? And we can vouch for it. But every tiny diamond that goes into an ornament, it is very, very difficult to tag them from a sheer volume handling perspective, right?
Sure.
And so on and so forth. So I'd probably like to stop here in the interest of my co-panelists.
Sure.
But
the sari thing just made me think, if you can get the women around you happy, I think half the problems are sorted. Definitely.
See, that's the whole point. Now, we have to distinguish between supply chain authenticity and customer authenticity. Mm-hmm. Now, this solution is a within Titan solution, right? It's not a third-party guarantee of authenticity. What I can promise to you is that my expert has sourced this, and what she sourced is exactly the one you're getting.
Sure.
But was that sari actually crafted according to the standards of handloom is something where the brand trust comes in.
Sure.
But the formal process of authentication of, let's say, the yarn itself or the zari, that's a different topic altogether,
Okay. Okay, so there's more to talk because there's life beyond that as well. So let me ask Vinod then. Vinod, so what is driving this change across the industry? Is it just consumer demand? As I was saying a little earlier, that it could be a whole variety of reasons. Can you paint that picture, and particularly in the case of your industry?
Yeah. So in generic sense, your part of the answer is that as a consumer, if we just step back, irrespective of what Atanu's talked about, and then Krishnan, interesting thing about sari, I didn't know that there is a traceability there as well. But if you talk about, say, food, and you're going on Zomato, as a consumer, you want to know how much time will it take so that you can decide, I want to order a food. So you have a product in mind. And then you can choose. So it says 39 minutes, 15 minutes. You say, okay, this 15 minutes. And then you want to see, is it coming in the right place and is it coming in time? So as a consumer, we have already seen the power of this technology, and the same consumer goes and becomes a part of somebody's CEO, or he's a big hospital who is ordering a lot of medicine. So the expectation is there, and they have seen that this is possible. It's possible for FedEx, DHL, for Zomato. So you can trace things as it happens. And that is what is now building as a requirement in people's mind, and when they talk about this. In auto industry, coming to auto industry, it's as Krishnan was also saying that, like Atanu, we are fortunate that we don't have to be in that zone where it has to be tracked by minute, temperature and all. But then if you see what EV is proposing, the electronic vehicle which is coming in, apart from mechanical parts, there is also a lot of firmware, which is, controlling all this critical thing, driverless car. Imagine there is no traceability on the firmware which is going on the driverless car, and there is a new release which has happened, and what you call as FOTA, firmware over the air update. So you need to know that, okay, there was a bug in this and it has to be fixed. You don't need to fix the one which is right, but you need to fix the one which is wrong. Apart from that, the vehicles also have safety products like airbags, brakes, things like that, where you have to make recalls pretty swift, and it has to be accurate because there are legal angle as well. Apart from that, all other products, whether it's lights or even to the extent seatings and all, they need to have traceability so that was it manufactured as per the specification of the government for that product, specification of the OEM, and if it has gone bad, which are the batch which need to be recalled? So the recall thing is more there. And that is why this the aspect of traceability is becoming more and more important. And there are various technologies which are available. And depending upon the need, you can choose the best fit. And also keeping the cost in mind, because everything is, at the end, you want to give the best price to the customer. I hope I was able to answer this.
Okay, definitely. So there are too many aspects to cover there. Okay, let's also get a sense from Visteon then, because as you go across your everyday work, Aashish, is it possible today for you to track the inventory availability with all vendors and maybe decide on all the issues in transit data? And there are too many issues there. What are some of the challenges that you face, or the industry faces?
Yeah, sure, Ashu. First of all, thanks to ET Auto IBM for this opportunity. It's such an interesting last few minutes as I heard from all the experts. Now, we all face the same challenges, right? So to answer your question, is it possible? Yes. Now in the current scenario where we have a lot of global semiconductor shortage, the way we procure our raw material has completely changed. And that has gone beyond just going to the respective OEMs to even other sources, distributors, and other channels where we can find material. Because as Levine alluded to in the first stage, right, a supply chain continuity may be having like 6 to 10% on revenue, but there's an intangible aspect of the damage that it can cause if we have any supply chain disruptions. So we need to look for alternate sources of how we are sourcing our material in order to stay or keep up to our commitments for our deliveries. And therefore, both traceability and authenticity that were discussed just now are extremely important to make sure that the chip or the IC or the micro that we are receiving is indeed authentic and is coming from the right source. Otherwise, we will have a product which may not work, which may not be durable, and so on and so forth. So that is the back-end supply chain. If you see, tracing all the way back to the source, we have had in general, in the automotive parlance, we say we have the e-coms, electronic components, and the mechanical components. So the e-coms were generally considered to be a smooth supply chain. There were barcodes, QR codes, and everything. The whole thing was adequate for that point in time. But in today's scenario, with these challenges that we have, and I think there could be also future scenarios, the existing tools are not enough. We need to have more visibility. We need to have more the digital towers, digital twins, control towers, bringing more intelligence, bringing more artificial intelligence, and maybe a little distance away also bring in blockchain, right? So those kind of things which will bring in transparency issues, which will solve the trust issues, are certainly the need of the hour as the tools that we need to run the business.
Okay, also the sense from financial services perspective, Levine, that is also one very regulated business and which is fast being disrupted because of the way technology is emerging across their services and product lines. Would you like to paint a picture of the challenges faced by the financial services industry?
Yeah, sure, Ashu. So certainly, there's a few different kinds of challenges facing the financial services community, right? On the one hand, we have extreme disruption in terms of the latest fintech type technologies like cryptocurrencies, non-fungible tokens, blockchain in general, et cetera, right? But one has to keep in mind that in the world of supply chain, there's a number of different streams of information being exchanged or flows within the supply chain, right? There's certainly the first level is the physical supply chain, where you've got the physical flow of goods and every single thing that happens to a physical object in terms of manufacturing, transportation, packaging, shipping, and so on. Then the second level is the business synchronization of processes. Exchange of business transaction documents. And that has a dependency for financial services as well, because the third dimension is the financial services supply chain, right? So the holy grail for funders is how do they actually bridge the gap between the physical supply chain and the financial services supply chain? Reason it's important is when funders have visibility into physical events, they can intervene at the right time and offer their customers the right funding vehicles, right? This is particularly the case with cross-border trade, because you've got the exchange of letters of credit, bill of lading, and so on, right? So financial services organizations have been looking at this for a long time. The technology is there now. Mm-hmm. It's a case of, I always say this, that traceability and trade and reducing friction across the end-to-end value chain is not something a single organization can achieve on its own. This is very much a team sport. So the technology is very much there. It's a case of how do we marshal our trading partner network? And the most difficult challenge, as you know, it's a people thing. How do we get a number of people or a community to work together and agree on things? But that also happens to be the most enriching thing in our lives, right? Getting people to actually agree and move towards a common goal, doesn't it?
Mm-hmm. Okay, so what has changed in the last few months, if I were to say, Vinod, if you can take that, besides the obvious that has changed in the last 18 months or so, what are some of those inefficiencies in the supply chain that you've maybe ironed out in the last 18 months or so? And how has digital technologies or initiatives help you solve some of those challenges?
Sure. So I'll answer it from two perspectives. As a tier 1 auto component manufacturer supplying mostly to the OEMs as a B2B business. So one is that we would expect raw material to come from our vendors, from suppliers, and they should be coming in the right time with the right form and the right quality. And then we send it to the OEMs, because most of the OEMs, we work in a milk run mode. So if one of the milk run stops, we basically stop somebody's line. So it's very critical that we are in time and right quality. So what we have tried to work out is based on some experiences, and we have 44 plants across the globe. So we have tried certain things in certain plants, and taking advantage of the geography, we are trying multiple ideas there. So one is doing the traceability on the shop floor for the products which are getting manufactured. And so as Aashish was also saying, that we have different QR code, barcode, then laser etching in all of that. So we can, if we scan a product, finished product, we can tell what is the batch, when was it manufactured, who was the critical quality station, who was the worker, was he skilled enough, what was the torque which was applied. So all of that data gets captured, which helps to investigate a quality issue or also to recall something there. And other is like I was talking about the vendor. So we also noticed during this last 18 months or 1 year period, what we have seen is disruption in supply chain and not being able to see when is this product coming in, because you don't want to stock too much. You don't want to stock too less. Okay. At the same time, I talked about the milk run. You also want to make sure that your OEM doesn't get impacted. So we have tried various things, and we have zeroed down on something that is working out very good, is tracking on time in full for the vendor. Okay. So we give a schedule which comes out of our SAP, goes to the vendor, and then we track that. Is it, so what it does, it is a Pareto approach. So there are some vendors who are doing it perfectly, and there are some which need help. So the on time in full report that we have developed in the last 6 months is helping us to identify which are the suppliers where we need to focus and what is the help that we can give to them. Are they technologically challenged? Do have a ROANA issue? Things like that. And then we are helping them to make sure that they are able to fulfill the promise so that we can fulfill the downstream promise that we have with OEM. And so that we are trying to do this technology. So BI, the SAP data, then we have a BI report, which is doing all this data crunching and this part. Then we have, I talked about implementation of IoT, which has happened for a few plants in Europe and started for India. So this will capture the data and some part is already there in place, which is stabilized and there for critical products. So we are trying to build and make it 100% is what I'm trying to say, is make it 100% for all the plants across the globe and the project has started. And then after this is done, then we will also be working on the end part of it. So making sure we track our shipments all the way to the suppliers, to the OEMs. So this is the journey that we are in today.
And just a follow-up question, if you can give
Sure.
a sense of that as well. For the suppliers which are quick to, move on to the new system, as you said, work pretty well.
Yeah.
The ones which are not able to do that, are you able to get them up to speed well enough, fast enough?
So what we are doing is, I'm also, just like I'm part of certain manufacturing forums. So there is a CI manufacturing forum in this region. And there, that forum, we have formed a team where we are trying to do road shows or sort exercises for these OS vendors who are technologically challenged. They want to, there is a will to do it. There is a intent to do it, but they don't know how to do it. So we are arranging those sessions for them, which is in the plan. We are collecting nominations, and we have put in a plan together is to do it. So that is one idea that we are doing. As Varroc, we reach out and we prescribe that this is how we have done. These are the things that have to be done. And if you face any difficulty, please reach out to us. We will help you in trying to do it. So that is how we are trying to tackle it.
Okay, so Atanu, the pharmaceuticals, because that appears to be pretty critical for, from whatever I've heard everyone speak. How does, the new law, when it comes in, how quickly can things get to, get for all companies, and how soon will companies be able to turn things around so that traceability and visibility that we're talking about is possible?
So the key thing is that Indian pharmaceutical industries, the companies who are catering to the international market, those companies have the ability to respond very quickly because they are as such doing it for the other countries and other markets. But the domestic companies who are just catering to the domestic market, they would take a good amount of time to get it operational because the nuts and bolts of it to implement it is very difficult. And I think it has to be a phased-wise approach where critical products are first mandated and then it gets done to other products. For example, all injections are the ones which are where cost of counterfeit is very high. An injection for a cancer could be 15,000 rupees, 20,000 rupees, 30,000 rupees. And if that becomes a counterfeit, the patient is losing a lot of money. And those are also the medicines where a counterfeit can be fatal for the patient. So so there is not too much of a problem for a paracetamol. And most likely, even if there is a counterfeit, the other paracetamol will not hurt you to that extent. But it is important for the complex drugs. So the complex drugs needs to be prioritized. And most likely, those are the products where the companies would be in a position to do it. So just to summarize, I think the companies who are catering to the global markets, they are as such prepared to do it. So whenever the law happens in India, they would be able to address that. But for other companies who are only focusing on the domestic market, they will take some time to do it because doing it for the complete value chain, it takes good amount of physical infrastructure changes which needs to be done. And also the systems and the discipline which people need to now do it, because earlier they were working in a particular way and there is a lot of change management and behavior changes which needs to happen for people to work in a different way. And we are talking of the complete value chain. It is not only the pharma companies, but the distributors, the transporters, the chemist from where you buy the drug, everybody needs to change the way they are working. But it is not very difficult also because today's technology are also quite user-friendly. So it is not so complex. You don't need to be, do things in a mundane way. So I'm actually quite hopeful that it will get executed. but there has to be investment which has to be made across all the supply chain. So that would take some time.
Okay, so automobiles also an area where there is enough counterfeit and fake products there. Vinod, your take on the challenges that the industry faces, because a lot of the companies, again, a lot of the auto component manufacturers would they see value in getting onto this, I won't use the word bandwagon, but getting onto this new way of working?
Yeah, I think counterfeit definitely hurts a lot. And especially in India, like if you're an auto part manufacturer, there is a market in Delhi where you can get a lot of product which looks almost similar. You cannot make out, and you lose a lot of business because of that, especially in the aftermarket business. If it's a first fit, you are ensured that the product goes from your company to the OEM and it gets fit. But once it is out of warranty and there is aftermarket business, most of the companies run, that really hurts in that area. And there is a lot of incentive to, go for techniques like the barcode or the code where you can, the example that we saw about the sari is something very innovative. You can put it and you can make sure that, the code is, the product is a real one that is coming from your department. So I can see there is a huge incentive in case of aftermarket business for all these big companies. And especially in two-wheeler market, the aftermarket business is huge in India. And there is no dearth of two-wheelers. If you see the lot of spare part shops that you have across India, there are more, I would say 70% would be the two-wheeler and three-wheeler, and then it goes to that four-wheeler and then the truck community. So definitely traceability and again, going back to authenticity, efficiency is also a big part of it. And as a customer, if you're paying for it, you'd like to have the best part so that you get a longer life on your vehicle.
Okay, Vinod, I understand that you have to leave. There is something very, very urgent that you have to attend to. So yeah. We'd like to thank you for being with us and that you still spend a few minutes with us. Thanks indeed. And we look forward to having you again with us on the Economic Times.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Thank you, Vinod.
We'll continue our discussion. Ashish, if you can add to the point of the kind of challenges that smaller companies and the entire supply chain could face in your industry because of this and the change way of working.
Yeah, sure, Ashutosh. So as you rightly said, right, if we have to bring in a change, and in this complex supply chain world that we are living in, unless the entire supply chain adopts those changes and adopts or adapts the technological needs, we will somewhere always have a loophole which remains to be fixed, right? So there is a need for us to have standardization of the requirements or the technological needs that needs to be adopted by all the players throughout the supply chain. So as Vinod was mentioning, right, it is in the aftermarket, and also I would say also the B2B tier 1 segment, since we are always in this milk run just in time and with a large number of inventories, we need to go beyond, let's say, the traditional control towers or the display towers, which were only giving visibility to more data-driven or AI-driven or intelligent control towers, which not only give us like the end-to-end visibility, they give us real-time tracking, they give us information sharing. More important, they give us the early warning alerts, because as in the whole supply chain, if there are some who have not adopted, so we should be able to predict where is our focus area, where is the spot where we need to focus, where somebody would drop the ball. So we need to have the early warning alerts. And also there has to be, the whole system has to be a little bit more cognitive in being able to demonstrate where there could be a problem. And with today's tools that we have now around data and digital transformation and digitization and artificial intelligence, it is possible. To some extent, we have adopted this, but it's still a little way to more institutionalize this will take a longer time, where we can have more predictive and prescriptive decision supporting that can help us in taking the right decisions.
Okay, so Krishnan, I think your idea of the sari seems to have been a hit with people listening. So I can clearly see even Vinod referred to that. So when companies approach, since Titan has done this, so when companies approach and go ahead with giving the trace option for distributors and end consumers, what are some of the challenges they face, and how does it show up in the trust that the brand builds?
It depends on the product itself. Okay, so I'm not trying to trivialize, but let's take eggs, for example, right? Many of these egg boxes come with a label saying that the chicken was allowed to run around and was fed only grains, right? Now I can assure authenticity from the sealed box onwards. Fine. But what about the egg itself? How do I know that the egg actually came from a chicken of this type, right? And I personally would not know the product well enough to know whether an egg laid by a happy chicken that was allowed to run around is actually more nutritional than one that was cooped up. I don't know that, right? But the product authenticity itself, very specifically, is a very physical and industry-specific subject matter, right? But probably from the packaging onwards, the problem has actually been solved, right? You take wine, for example, right? The bottling of the wine itself, we have to trust the maker. But from that point onwards, if the bottle is sealed and there is a tag on it, similar to the optical tag which I spoke of, then being able to trace that this particular bottle that was bottled somewhere in France or Nashik or wherever is exactly the bottle that I'm consuming. That problem has frankly been solved, right? Pharma also, I mean, fantastic problem. The powder that goes into paracetamol or the chemical that goes into the injection, where did it exactly come from? It's liquid. And we have the similar problem with gold as well, right? We are a company that's committed to responsible sourcing. So all of us know, for example, the horrific concept of blood diamonds, right? And we are absolutely committed to not being part of that value chain at all. But the practical problem of buying from source, frankly, does remain. And we are addressing it further and further up the chain. But there is a point at which the seller will say, yes, this is your starting point. And up to that point, I can promise you authenticity and ethicality, right? But beyond that, where was it actually dug from? It's an origin question which the industry globally has yet to solve. So not an easy one, right? When it comes to watches, certainly the watch is a sealed unit. We have a unique code on it. We are planning to use the optical tag there as well. There the customer can absolutely enjoy the feel of that authentic tag on the product. But is it possible on all products? No. On a earring, how do you put it? You know, this has to be solved industry by industry, product by product. Not easy.
Clearly, you're looking to keep the women happy when you're referring to saris and earrings. I can see that, Krishnan. And I'm sure they'll be happy to hear. Levine, you raised a hand, you wanted to make a point. And I also wanted to ask if you can weave it into your answer. What are some of those best practices that companies need to make sure that they do when they're putting together the entire process for traceability and visibility?
I think, Ashish, Ashu, you read my mind, because I was going to talk about the best practices and addressing the challenges around standardization, right? So I think in terms of traceability, it does vary based on product. And I think Krishnan is right. We've seen a lot of success with customers in every industry sector around improving traceability. In fact, reducing the burden around traceability from a week up and downstream to like 2 seconds, right? The best practice is this, that looking at the overall approach, you have to use a combination of the right technology, the right standards, and standards, there's multiple dimensions of standards, right? There's identifiers, and I think Atanu mentioned the serialization. There's standards for capturing supply chain events, like everything that happens to a physical item when it's been manufactured or produced or packaged. There's standards for transmitting transactions or exchanging transactional documents like purchase orders, invoices, shipping notices, and so on. And there's standards for exchanging other documents, such as financial documents like letters of credit, bill of exchange, and so on. And the challenge is, how do you actually pull all this together? Now, there have been best practices. There have been amazing examples and case studies of organizations doing this successfully. I think the important consideration is, and I think India is at an inflection point at the moment in terms of understanding how can it implement standards. And certainly government plays a significant role from two perspectives. One is as a regulator, and two is collectively. Generally in most countries, government is the largest buyer of stuff collectively, right? Mm-hmm. So they have a significant role to play in terms of influencing. But the third factor is large organization historically, as we've seen over the last 40 years, as the supply chain has been increasingly digitized, large organizations, particularly retailers, enforce a particular set of standards or solutions on their trading network for their own benefit, because they recognize the benefit of automation and digitization, right? So large organizations certainly do play a role in driving the use of these standards. So whilst on the one hand, we might look to the government in India to start mandating standards, large organizations do have a role to play in influencing the use of those standards, right? The caution here is, and this is particularly around best practice, is you have to look at case studies and examples of how it's done in other countries as well, because most importantly, India is not a trading island, right? Businesses in India trade with companies internationally. So fundamentally, the interoperability of supply chain networks in India is critical to interoperate with supply chain networks globally. And so it's a case of, let's look at best practice, let's look at case studies in terms of how this has been implemented in other countries, and replicate that, because those solutions are already available. And it's a case of rapidly using those approaches, if that makes sense.
Okay, very interesting word, the interoperability that you mentioned, Levine. I was going to talk of that. So maybe you're reading my mind as well. I was going to talk about that and wanted Aashish to come in on that. Aashish, what are you seeing as the most important pieces of data that is shared across, with trading partners, among trading partners, and what's the degree of standardization and maybe interoperability as well?
Yeah, I think that's a very valid question. And as Levine mentioned, there is increasing digitization or digital transformation of the supply chain. So we are now lucky that we have at least access to data which we can process, right? So the challenge now comes is when we have the look at the whole supply chain, right? So we will, if everything is digitized across all supply chains, what we are really looking at is to have like a risk monitor, right? So what we need is a risk monitor, which is able to pick up data from the different elements of the supply chain. We can have we can create a detailed simulation model of the entire supply chain that uses real-time data and is able to not only give us tracking information, but is also able to give us more predictive analysis, right? So whether it is RFID or it is IoT sensors or it is just the supplier data monitor. So all of these elements, they will come into a standard building block like a risk monitor, and that will give us more of a predictive analysis or prediction of what are the areas where we need to spot. And then those can be converted into like mobile apps and have APIs, and then the users can also see where there is an alarm where they need to focus on.
Okay, coming back to pharmaceuticals, and again, Atanu, the way you explained it is still playing on the mind, and I can still imagine. So can you explain, Atanu, how does it work, let's say, in an overseas market, because Biocon sells its products in several other markets, and what the the companies that operate in the Indian market, so to say, non-exporters, how they are going about doing the things, and what is the degree of difference, if you can explain, please. You're on mute, Atanu.
The companies who have been catering to the international market has, over the years, build a much more, I would say, streamlined supply chain. And the interoperability part of it has also been addressed. When you look at the complete value chain, so it is, you know, at the nuts and bolts of it, things like master data management, which is a very mundane subject, but that becomes the foundation of getting all these things done. So what I am talking about as a distributor, are you talking about the same material? A distributor handles everybody's products. So what you call remdesivir, does that other fellow who is also selling me call the same remdesivir with same name? So it all starts with the nuts and bolts of it, how you do this master data management across the whole supply chain, because the distributor or the chemist, he might be handling remdesivir of every company's thing. So they are the, how do you know that part? Are you talking the same lingo? So standards for doing this data management across the value chain is one important thing. And that is where governments and or the industry bodies have to step in. Otherwise, it will never work. Now, wherever countries like US, where it has been very successful, they have something called, they have a code which makes that all remdesivirs of various companies the same, and which is not there in many other countries who have this regulation. India, definitely, we are a long way to go. So first is at an industry body level, some type of data management platform, which says that this, the product which you are talking about, and I'm talking about the same product, that uniformity. That is one of the foundational things. Apart from that, so that is which has to happen at an industry body level. After that, it is going to be, you know, that each company have to make that investment in the hardware, software, and most of these solutions tend to be cloud driven to make it a faster adoption, which is easier today than what it was earlier, because the cloud software solutions are now available, which was not there, say, so predominant 5 years or 10 years back. So that will help in faster adoption. So when coming, and the Indian companies who are exporting, as you said, are already prepared for it. So when it happens in India, it will be easier for them. For the other companies, there has to be that investment which has to be made into the line management in the factory, where you have to put those QR codes there, the nuts and bolts of it, that each strip, do you have to make it at each strip? And where do you put that QR code? Then 10 strips makes a pack. Do you do at the primary, then the secondary, then at the tertiary level? So one devil lies in the details, and doing all these things take a lot of effort. And the consumption pattern, like in India, the chemist will sell, if there is a tablet, they will give only 2 tablets if you need it, not the whole strip. Then the QR code will get lost because that is in the last part of it. So all these challenges are there. Now, all challenges can't get addressed at one go, but majority will get addressed. Having said that, that's why what I have been proposing in various industry bodies, that do it for complex products which matter more to the customers and the patients, and there it will be easier to implement. And then you go it for other products, and many of the mass products, you might not at all need it because it doesn't damage too much to the patients. Means the risk is less. So one has to take a risk-based approach while doing this. There are 8,000 pharma companies in the country, and which are listed. There are so many unlisted. So it would be difficult to do it across the board. So one has to take a phased-wise approach, but doing the data management at an industry body level is the foundational block to make it happen. Otherwise, it will not happen. Because if I call remdesivir with one number, another calls with another number, the poor distributor who is taking products from all of them, does he have to build systems for mapping with each of the product? That person cannot do. And same the chemist, the retailer, the chemist in the last mile, that person also cannot do. So having an uniform data management where we might have different codes, different brand names, but they mean the same thing, that is the fundamental building block which has to be done at an industry level, which other countries have done that. Without that, we will not be able to.
I was just also going to come to that and ask Krishnan about it, because Titan obviously is the leader in its category. So, Krishnan, large organizations setting standards, how can India make sure that we do it right and it kind of cuts across industries? Would you like to suggest something?
I'm actually happy to share that on many fronts, including sustainability and stakeholder partnership, we have been taking the lead. So, for example, during the unfortunate events of last year, which I really hope are behind us now and going forward, right? We extended serious help to our suppliers as well as our franchisees, financial and otherwise, right? We did that. And in the area of responsible sourcing, we are leaders, right? In terms of being very conscious of what we buy and where we buy it from. Our jewelry makers, as you know, the finest pieces of jewelry still have to be made by hand, right? And there's a whole community of karigars who have been working in conditions that, to put it mildly, are not conducive. Okay, I mean, I don't know whether you've seen some of those images. We have actually created and funded the creation of karigar parks, in which working conditions are far, far better, including seating of the kind which I enjoy and an ergonomic workspace. So most of our folks who make our jewelry have much better working conditions than the industry used to be at. And I think it's not just us. There are other players also getting there. But these are just a few examples of the kind of things that leaders can do, right? Now, when it comes to sustainability, the conservation of water, the use of electricity, creating greenery. We have forests in our Hosur ecosystem, and I think there was a video sent around, I think, TVS in Hosur. I think 30 or 50 acres of greenery. Fantastic it is, right? Including, I think, elephants there.
Wow.
So these are just some of the examples, and we are striving to be right up there. And it's not just CSR, right? It's built into our core operations and the way we work with our partners who are suppliers as well as franchisees. So I think there is definitely a space for leadership organizations to very consciously identify where it is imperative and possible also, and seriously invest, right? Obviously, a single company can't do,
correct,
shall we say, everything, right? But in the area of influence, certainly have the right concerns and go ahead and invest in addressing them. We are very, very clear and very committed in that area.
Okay. Levine, I'd like to come to you next and just get a sense of, when you look from your perch across countries and the kind of work that is being done on the area, in the area of traceability and visibility, so that there is a consensus among companies and the industries, and of course the policy part itself. Can you probably give a sense of the best practices that companies are adopting?
Yeah, sure, Ashu. So one of the common things that are happening around policies around traceability is the evolution of blockchain in terms of the distributed ledger aspect to it is that one of the good things about it is that it enables a governance across a number of organizations, and it enables the policies to be encoded in those solutions, right? And so what we are seeing is organizations around the globe are joining distributed ledger networks for that very reason, because what it does is it creates that single source or secured source of truth that everybody uses as a common ledger. So it reduces friction with those businesses, and it applies that common governance and policies, right? And so that is the strong basis for traceability in those organizations, right? And we learned this through our own experience, right? I think not a lot of people, a lot of people consider that IBM's a technology solutions organization, but don't really see us as a supply chain organization, right? So we are a large supply chain organization. We operate in over 170 countries. So certainly our own experience has been, the Japanese tsunami in 2011 created great disruption for our business as well, right? And since then, we started using our own technologies, such as artificial intelligence, cognitive analytics, and blockchain to actually reduce friction, reduce disruption in our own supply chain. And it's yielded fantastic results. And based on that, we now provide those solutions to customers, right? So in 2019, we received a few Frost & Sullivan awards based on that, right? So based on that experience, we've been able to help customers around the globe in understanding how can you use disruptive technology to actually encode those policies and the governance because one of the biggest issues you have with adopting standards is everybody adopting it the same way, right? Is everybody using the same prescription? And this is where you need that kind of open governance that actually ensures that all parties who are collaborating in a way that's beneficial to everybody, if that makes sense, right?
Mm-hmm. And Ashish, from an industry point of view, this is also this conversation or this kind of conversation happening at a time when the entire ICE industry, the combustion engine vehicle industry, is getting disrupted. So is this an opportunity for the entire industry to just ride on this opportunity and move ahead with a smarter way of working? Would you say that?
Yes, Ashutosh. So, of course, indeed, the autonomous, shared, electrification, connected, these are the market trends in the automotive domain. And what this means, as I was speaking to you earlier, was that this means that there is more electronic content that is going into per vehicle. And especially now where we are living in the time, it's a very interesting time if you see, right? At one point in time, we now have more access to data, more access to solutions, more access to ready-made cloud solutions, open source solutions, so that we can process the data. And at the same time, we also have this technology of 5G and connectivity, which is coming in, which is something which doesn't happen every year, right? So 4G to 5G and 5G, these are like happening over a period of time. So that means that with both technologies of AI and connectivity, 5G enabling that, right? There will be a confluence or a point of inflection where you will see, suddenly, tremendous increase of the electronic content in the vehicles. Now, when you see increase in electronic content of the vehicles, traditionally and architecturally with the whole vehicle electrical architecture, the electric vehicles will be more amenable to adopt these technologies much faster. And also the consumers will be the ones who will be more preferring to see that extension of their mobile phone or their tablet in the automotive cockpit. So the consumer demand is going to be there. So what does that mean for automotive companies, tier one suppliers, manufacturing companies like us, is to actually look at the changing trend, which is almost inevitable. It is about to happen. And then look at the challenges and opportunities that we have from a supply chain point of view. One of the things that I can say is a mix of supply chain and also the value proposition is to localize and also do supplier development and bring capability in India and make in India on the electronics content, so that it's still we are not there yet, we're just starting, but whatever value content that we can increase, which is more indigenous in the electronics value stream, right? That is something which is truly going to be a change in the way we have the current supply chain and the current value that is set up versus the increased content that we need to add. So there is a lot of chip design, for example, right? So there are like numerous, almost every chip design company has an engineering center in India, right? But we do not have manufacturing. So that is going out. So similarly, even in the context of automotive electronics and cockpit electronics in our content, there is a lot of capability that's available. One of the things that we are now, we are almost there, we are now adopting now is to localize displays, right? So every car now no longer has the dials and gauges. You will see large screens and so on. So displays or LCD or TFT monitors is becoming an inevitable part of the vehicle. That is the first thing that we as Visteon as a company is adopting, to localize that so that we can bring more value in India.
Okay, very interesting the way the cars are changing for tomorrow, and as we gear up for the EVs to take over and all become part of the EV revolution. Krishnan, also about some of the challenges in getting the right people for this change that will happen, because some of this will have to be people driven as well, because the processes need to be followed, not just for the system, but also for the people. So are you seeing the staff burdened with technical complexity with whether it's your trading partners or the extended supply chain for you? Are there any technology barriers that you see in making sure this happens and you're ready for tomorrow?
None, actually, right? And if I were to answer business by business of what Titan does, that would take too long, frankly, right? But in summary, so long as the lead organization, in this case Titan, ensures as part of its ecosystem leadership that the process is indeed made simple with the right investments. And I think Atanu remarked some time back that so many technologies and platforms and tools are already available, right? So it is so much easier for a large organization that is really, shall we say, the big one in the particular ecosystem, to be able to invest in crafting a solution that makes it super easy for all of the participants to use, and therefore lessens or eliminates the reasons for not using. Right? It can be made demonstrably so easy that finally, if I were to give a negative answer, there is no reason to not participate. You know, how much more simple do you want it to be, right? If you take the Tanera example, it's just a case of fixing a tag and taking a photograph of the tag with the sari underneath. That's it. And after that, if you peel off the tag and put it somewhere else, the software tells you that is certainly not the fabric on which it was placed, right? As simple as that. And so many examples abound. So I do not think that complexity is a matter of inherent gaps. It is probably a matter of simply the will to implement right across. Again, having said that, the answer differs from industry to industry, right? In the case of food, how to establish provenance, where it actually originates, that's where the real question is. Once the packaging is done, the solutions have existed for years now.
Yeah.
Right? No issues. Yeah. And tamper-proof packaging, again, existed, and it's only getting better.
Yeah. So, Levine, the onus should be on the leaders across categories, whether we're talking food, whether you're talking financial services, pharmaceuticals, or others, to go ahead and show the way, possibly even in a context like India, where we still don't have the laws. Do we see that happening in other parts of the world?
Yes, Ashu. I mean, historically, that's been happening for decades, right? Large industries or organizations recognizing the benefit of technology have implemented certain technologies within their own trading networks, right? But there is a caution to that. And the caution is this, that all too often in the need to do things quickly and suiting the organization's own justification, there's always a tendency of a inside-out view the world from a perspective of our own lenses, and implement a solution that really could potentially create a trading island for each community. And this has happened in the EDI world, right? We've even seen large retailers, for example, implementing exactly the same standard in their own trading network, implementing it in a particular way that creates issues for common suppliers. Now, not in every industry do you have common suppliers, but in many industries you do have common suppliers where, you know, a farmer might supply strawberries to 2 different retail organizations. And so if that farmer has to comply with 2 different retail organization standards, it becomes cost prohibitive for them, right? And this is where industry bodies play a great role in prescribing the way standards should be used, right? I can't speak for India, but you know, GS1 is a standards organization, supply chain standards organization that's operating in almost every country in the world. They've got over 2 million business members. And I know from a Oceania perspective, as in Australia and New Zealand, they have played a very strong role in getting government to advocate the use of standards for traceability, particularly. And we've contributed to some of those guides. For example, there's an Australian guide for implementing food traceability. So, you know, the GS1 standards have been around for decades. They're around 50 years old. And so what was needed was ensuring that there is a prescription on how those standards are used. For example, you know, various events in the supply chain can be captured through those standards. So ensuring that everybody uses the same data elements in the same kind of way, and that provides the interoperability, right? So I think that's the only caution, is to make sure that, and the easy way to address it is to make sure that large organizations in India look at how similar problems have been solved in other countries around the world and borrow from that rather than creating something unique. Particularly, you know, the e-invoicing approach in India, that's very Indian unique, which means it causes a problem around cross-border invoicing. And I've been personally involved in invoicing approaches around the globe as well. So that's something that one should be very careful of, to make sure that you don't create a unique solution that inhibits cross-border trade, if that makes sense.
So Krishnan, obviously, it's very obvious now in the conversation that some industries need this traceability thing. It's pretty obvious seeing it in other parts of the world as well. Is there something unique about India where the scale could be bigger and we could move faster now that, as we discussed, there are multiple instances of this having been done in other parts of the globe?
See, again here, now, see the range of folks we have here, like Atanu talking about life and I talking about lifestyle, right? So we have to kind of decide where the urgency is, and obviously it has to be in the medical and perhaps the transport solutions areas, where clearly the benefit to the larger population is maximum, right? And in the jewelry industry, like I mentioned, the government has taken the initiative to establish hallmarking as a means for consumers to have an enhanced level of trust in what they're buying. So I think industry selection where the benefit to people at large is maximized should be the simple criteria. And then evolving a reasonable mandate, like Atanu said, things will take time. We have to reasonably expect that, but also mandate that it has to be done, right? Now, I don't know how this Australian Open controversy is going to play out, just to go completely sideways, but it looks like the reigning champion is not going to be able to enter Australia because he has chosen not to declare his vaccine status, right? And to me, that's actually an example of the kind of stand that may need to be taken in certain contexts, right? It doesn't matter who you are. We have a policy of allowing only vaccinated people to enter. And if you're not willing to comply, I mean, forfeit the title. I don't know how this will play out. That's what I mean. But at this moment of time, the stand is one which I quite like, frankly. And that stand needs to be taken, depending on whether it's life or lifestyle. And choose the industries where you want to focus, right? Because obviously bandwidth is limited. And just make sure that common welfare in so many contexts gets elevated.
Okay, I get your point, but usually the practice has been in India, we don't tend to look at it that way often. You know, when GST was being implemented, the talk was make it revenue neutral. So the very idea, I would think, kills the concept of lowering taxes and ensuring higher compliances. And, you know, the larger issue.
See, that's I mean, we'll probably need another 2-3 hours and probably a very different set of panelists. I'm certainly not qualified to comment on that. Right. Definition of the common good is itself such a vexed topic, right? And right from taxation into various other regulations, what is the definition of common good and how to achieve it? Is this way beyond my pay grade, if I may put it that way.
Well, all of us, I would imagine. But two sectors that, as we've also discussed, automobiles or auto components and pharmaceuticals do face the brunt, and traceability is so important. So, Aashish, now for the solutions part, how can we as an industry go about pushing the agenda that it happens faster and maybe the consumer's interest, end user's interest is kept in mind, and then we work backwards?
Absolutely, a very right question. So I think that the question now at this point, now we all heard what are the challenges that we have, right? So the question now is, what is the operating model that we need to choose to be able to deliver maximum value to the end customer? And there, the first question that we need to address that comes is that we are living in an uncertain time. Thus, the uncertainty is also swinging. It is on the supply side. There is a supply uncertainty and there is a demand uncertainty. So if we look at the last 12, 18 months, right, when COVID almost just started, we've seen in national news, there were like 2-3 months where OEMs had, like auto OEMs had zero sales and so on, which was absolutely unprecedented. And the thought in the boardroom was that, you know, at this point in time, with so much of crisis that's going in everybody's personal life, people won't buy cars, and OEMs or companies will not invest in new programs, right? Because that is something which is all to be deferred, those kind of investments. So the idea was that, you know, the demand side is going to just completely slop down. And what we saw is, you know, to our pleasant surprise, that it wasn't the case, right? So after a few months of being through this, you know, we saw that the demand was picking up. And the programs or the investments that the companies have to do to design new products for new vehicle launches. And we all have seen, there has not been any dearth of vehicle launches, even if we see in the India context, despite all that people endured in the last 18 to 19. So coming to the point is, where is the problem? Is it on the supply side or the demand side? I would say uncertainty is on both sides. There's uncertainty on the supply side. We have chip shortages, we have semiconductor, which are global problems. And there, if you trace the whole supply chain, it's just completely complicated. And then we also have uncertainty on the demand side, right? So there's a problem. So the point is, what is the operating model that we need to choose? Because we have challenges to meet. We are always just in time milk run. We have not too many higher turns of inventories and so on. So what should we do? So I think we again need to go back to, and trust on or bank on all the digitization of the supply chain, use tools such as artificial intelligence and data. And also, I think I would add one more point here. Now, we also need to be very, very intelligent in avoiding the spread of inventory, right? So from the whole supply chain being so complicated, the inventory cannot be spread everywhere. It has to be positioned, it has to be right-sized, and it also has to be carefully monitored so that we can meet the end objective of just in time without taking too much losses on the operating version or the operating model of carrying so much inventory, because there is uncertainty on both sides.
Okay, so that's an interesting point that needs to be kept in mind. Atanu, for the pharmaceuticals industry, how can that solution happen? Because again, as you know, Krishnan has had my day today because of the kind of one-liners he's given and the kind of analogies he's given. But for the pharmaceuticals industry, what would you say?
So for faster implementation, actually, and that is something which we were all thinking about, how can you scale up the implementation? So it is very much possible, though while there are 8,000 plus pharma companies of different sizes and scale, even a 10 by 10 square feet of a room can be converted to a formulation plant. So how do you automate across the board for greater benefit? So that is where various service providers, solution providers can come together and they can build their solutions. And like, you know, the cloud has become very helpful in adoption and of technologies. These type of things, standardization, like for in the shop floor, standardization of how you plug in the barcodes, how you plug in this, these things can be to a large extent pre-created, and people can very quickly implement it in the shop floor, and solutions can be in the cloud where people can start adopting it. So if it is done in an organized fashion, I think the whole pharma industry, irrespective of the size of the factory, there can, as I said, there can be smallest factory at 10 by 10 square feet to the largest factories, which are acres and acres of land. They can all be very quickly adopt to the solution if planned well. In a span of 2 years, everything can get done. The user friendliness of the new solutions are very much evident, which used to be earlier there. You know, we used to hear of things of digital divide, and people who don't have the knowledge and the knowledge of computers and information technology, they will be left behind. I think that has been busted with the new technologies coming in. The digital divide has evaporated. So people who don't even know to read and write, they are using Google Pay, Paytm, and doing transactions. In Bangalore, begging has become also by Google Pay. I see that. So I think, and when actually, to my pleasant surprise, last year when the COVID happened, prior to that, I had created a vendor portal and I was requesting the procurement team for onboarding all the vendors. There was hardly any adoption, only 10% adoption had happened. In a week, when the lockdown started, not only 100% of the vendors got onboarded, but the whole value chain, even the distribution chain and the transporters who were doing the last mile shipments, they all started uploading through mobile apps their bills and everything, and their payment became online. Within 2 weeks, the end-to-end value chain from raw material purchase, utility purchase, invoice processing, and the distribution chain, everything happened. And people who can't sign, they started also adopting digital technologies to make it happen. So the user friendliness of the new technologies has actually removed the digital divide. So I'm very hopeful. If planned out well, the value chain would get digitized very fast. And the problems we are talking about will get solved. But the important part, which needs thought, one is the very good planning and comprehensive planning. But other thing where needs real hard work is that interoperability part of that data, so that you are speaking the same lingo, the data management layer. There, real brunt work, hard work needs to be done. But even there, the new technologies of image recognition, artificial intelligence, natural language processing. People don't have to map things by their brute force, but the technology can help map the remdesivir of Cipla, the remdesivir of Lupin, remdesivir of Biocon, of Dr. Reddy's means these things. So that you don't have to use human brain to do it. The technology can also do it, but the data management becomes a very crucial thing. And that affects pharmaceutical. It doesn't affect many of the other lifestyle products or consumer products because they have their own distribution chain. And here for us, the distributors handle everybody's product and the chemist in the last mile handles everybody's product. So that interoperability and the data management till the last mile is very important. The benefits of it far outweighs the effort which will be there, because when you have the last mile visibility, not only it helps me to do the supply chain planning effectively, but the wastages which happens today in the supply chain gets removed. Today, the whole Indian industry, pharmaceutical industry, if I see the number of expired products, it will be in the range of 2 to 5%. It is a criminal waste of resources and money because there are many patients who would have benefited with that drug. And that is happening because the product is not at the right place at the right time. Because we have an expiry date problem, and that is because supply chain planning and its execution and distribution is not happening properly.
Correct. Okay, so you spoke about the digital divide. So I guess with newer technologies, it's about digital multiplier. I would like to believe that that is possibly happening. Krishnan, last words for you before I go to Levine for a vote of thanks. That digital multiplier is working for you clearly. Can you build on that even further?
Oh, it's happening as we speak, right? Now, I know I may probably go off topic, but if you look at the virtuous cycle that's been created for organizations like ours, right? Customers engaging with us digitally and then visiting our stores. So we have information which they have shared with us and their journeys through the website, the app, and our loyalty program membership. So when you put all of this together, our analytical ability to reach out to customers with more and more relevance, we have ourselves seen propensity-based modeling become very effective. So clearly the multiplier across the ecosystem is there to stay. Obviously in the B2C multi-billion customer strong organizations like ours, the visibility is much higher. But I'm sure in B2B as well, or in B2B2C, like Atanu and Aashish was speaking, the benefits I'm sure are already being seen and felt, right? Much more agility, much more visibility right across means obviously supply chain optimization as well as customer happiness, seeing the right product, right time, and being assured because of the kind of traceability that's being built in, that what they're driving or what they're consuming is absolutely up to standard. And the recall process is so robust that even if a mishap happens, it doesn't stay that way for too long. And the manufacturer is able to call back, right? So assurance plus enjoyment, I can see that.
Okay, so today learned quite a few things. So if I may wrap up the last 90 minutes, and Krishnan, you've surely contributed to that understanding today. So keep the women happy, of course, very important, but from life to lifestyle, as Krishnan used the word, products need to be traced back to the origins for, it could be for all the stakeholders, and of course, very good for consumers. For that to happen, there's no law in place in India yet, but with industry and government joining hands, that could happen, and it'll be for the benefit of consumers and indeed the companies itself. It will be beneficial for them. That's the large picture. I think that's what the sum and substance of what we spoke in the last 90 minutes or so. Levine, time for a vote of thanks. Can I request you for that, please?
Thank you, Ashu. I just wanted to make a quick comment following the thread of what Atanu said and Krishnan said as well. If anything, the last 2 years, I always maintain that struggles and difficulty and constraints is the mother of all creation and innovation, right? In the last 2 years, we've seen such fantastic innovation in terms of the technology landscape to be able to help organizations to augment existing systems without throwing them out and plug and play and create new capabilities, right? It's just been fantastic. So I'd like to thank our esteemed colleagues for joining us, sharing their insights. It was very much an enriching and valuable session for me. I learned a lot and understood a lot about some of the challenges they're facing and their insights around what should we be doing to address some of these challenges, right? So thank you everyone again very much, and I hope you have a pleasant weekend.
Thank you so much, Levine, for that note. And it's time to wrap up. Thank you, gentlemen. Thank you, Aashish, Bhatia, Atanu Roy, Krishnan, Venkateswaran, Vinod, Khode, who had to leave because he had something very urgent to attend to, and Levine Naidoo for joining us all the way from Australia, even though it's a little late in the day for you. Thank you for being with us.
Thank you.
On Economic Times, and we look forward to you being with us whenever we have such an important discussion. Thanks indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, bye.